Back in 2014, out near the Cascades in Washington state, I was 32 years old and thought I understood how the world worked. My wife Sarah and I had just bought 12 acres of forest and scrub, no neighbors within a mile, and I was digging what would become our garden bed when I pulled up the skull. Late May, heavy rain all morning, and I'm standing there holding something the size of a basketball, eye sockets staring back at me. I showed it to Sarah that night. 2 days later, 3 black SUVs pulled into our driveway, and men in suits told me the skull was evidence in a federal investigation. They took it. They took my photos. They told me what I could and couldn't say. I still have one image on an old phone I keep hidden. I thought finding the skull was the strangest part. It wasn't. It was May 23rd when I found it, a Tuesday. The kind of day where the sky stays gray all afternoon and the trees drip long after the rain stops. I'd been turning soil near the edge of the property, working my way toward the tree line where the Douglas firs start to thicken. The shovel hit something solid, and I thought it was a rock at first, the kind that always shows up when you least want it. But when I pulled it free, dirt falling away in clumps, I saw the shape. Too round, too symmetrical, a skull. I knelt there in the wet earth, holding it in both hands, and my first thought was, bear. But it was too big for a bear, the cranial dome too high, the eye sockets set forward like a primate's. I turned it over, looking for damage, for anything that would explain it away as some hunter's trophy or a museum cast-off dumped in the woods. Nothing, just smooth bone, weathered but intact, heavier than I expected. I carried it to the barn and set it on the workbench, then stood there staring at it for 20 minutes. The proportions were wrong for anything I recognized. The sagittal crest running along the top reminded me of a gorilla skull I'd seen in a museum once, but the face was different, flatter, more human. I measured it with a tape measure, 11 inches from jaw to crown. Massive. I took photos with my phone, maybe a dozen from different angles, the flash making the bone look almost white against the dark wood of the workbench. I didn't know what I was going to do with them yet. I just knew I needed documentation. That evening, I brought Sarah out to the barn. She was grading papers from the elementary school where she taught, and I interrupted her, told her there was something she needed to see. She followed me outside, annoyed at first, but when I pulled back the tarp and showed her the skull, her expression changed completely. She picked it up carefully, turning it over in her hands, and I watched her face go from curiosity to confusion to something else. Fear, maybe, or recognition. She asked where I'd found it. I told her. She set it down gently and looked at me. "What is this?" she asked quietly. I said I didn't know. But even in that first moment, I think we both knew. We just couldn't say it yet. Sarah wanted to tell someone immediately. She talked about calling the university, maybe the Natural History Museum in Seattle, someone who could identify it properly. I hesitated. Something about the skull felt private, important in a way I couldn't explain. I told her I wanted to do some research first, make sure we knew what we were dealing with before we involved outsiders. She agreed, reluctantly. That night, I sat at my computer and searched for hours. Bear skulls, elk skulls, even gorilla skulls for comparison. Nothing matched. The bone structure was unique, the proportions wrong for any known animal. I found forums where people posted unusual finds, and I almost uploaded one of the photos twice. Both times I stopped myself. The next day, I measured everything. Length, width, cranial capacity, jaw structure. I documented it all in a notebook, sketching diagrams, noting details. The teeth were worn but intact, suggesting an omnivorous diet. The bone density was incredible, heavier than it should have been for its size. Sarah came into my office that evening and asked what I'd found. I showed her my notes, my sketches, the comparison images I'd saved. She sat down and read through everything silently. Then she looked up at me and said the word I'd been avoiding. "You think it's Bigfoot, don't you?" I didn't answer right away. The word felt ridiculous, like something from a cable TV show or a roadside attraction. But what else explained it? I told her I didn't know what else it could be. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she wanted to tell her sister. Just her sister, no one else. Her sister lived in Portland, worked as a veterinarian, might have some insight into what kind of animal could leave a skull like this. I said okay. Just her sister. I should have said no. That night, Sarah called her from the kitchen while I was in the office. I could hear her voice, through the wall, excited and nervous, describing what we'd found. I heard her say the word Bigfoot, almost laughing when she said it, like she was embarrassed. I heard her describe the measurements, the photos I'd taken. The call lasted maybe 20 minutes. When she came back into the office, she said her sister thought we should contact a wildlife biologist, maybe someone from the state parks department. I nodded and said we'd think about it. 2 days later, the FBI showed up. That was May 27th, a Thursday. I remember because I'd been planning to work on the garden that afternoon. I was in the barn when I heard the vehicles, 3 of them, black SUVs with tinted windows, pulling up the gravel driveway in a line. I walked out and saw men in dark suits getting out. 5 of them total, moving with the kind of coordination that told me this wasn't casual. The lead agent was tall, maybe mid-40s, with gray at his temples and wire-rimmed glasses. He walked up to me and showed me a badge, FBI. His name was Special Agent Rickman. He asked if I was the property owner. I said yes. He asked if I'd recently found any unusual items on the property. My stomach dropped. I looked past him toward the house and saw Sarah standing on the porch, her hand over her mouth. I looked back at Rickman and asked what this was about. He said they'd received information about a potentially significant archaeological find and needed to examine it. He asked where the skull was. I didn't answer immediately. I was trying to understand how they knew, how they'd found out so fast. Sarah's sister was the only person we'd told. Had she called someone? Had someone been listening? Rickman asked again, his voice firmer this time. I told him it was in the barn. He nodded to 2 of the other agents and they walked past me, into the barn, like they already knew where to look. Sarah came down from the porch, asking what was happening, why the FBI was here. Rickman turned to her and asked if she was the one who'd made the phone call to Portland 2 days ago. She froze. I saw the realization hit her face. She'd told her sister, and somehow that information had reached the FBI within 48 hours. Rickman asked us both to step away from the barn while his team secured the evidence. I asked what evidence, what investigation. He said he wasn't at liberty to discuss an ongoing federal matter, but that we'd be provided with a receipt for any items removed from the property. I watched the agents bring out the skull in a clear plastic evidence bag, sealing it with red tape, photographing it from multiple angles. They brought out the notebook where I'd recorded my measurements. They asked for my phone. I said I needed a warrant for that. Rickman made a call, and 20 minutes later, a warrant arrived via email, authorizing the seizure of any photographic or digital evidence related to the find. I handed over my phone. They copied everything and gave it back. Then, they started marking off the area where I'd found the skull with yellow tape, crime scene tape. Rickman asked me to show him exactly where I'd dug up the skull. I led him to the spot near the edge of the garden, about 30 feet from the tree line. The hole was still visible, partially refilled with loose dirt. He knelt down and examined it, taking photos with a professional camera, making notes on a tablet. He asked how deep I'd found it. I told him about 18 inches, just below the root layer. He asked if I'd found anything else in the area, any other bones, any artifacts. I said no, just the skull. He made another note. 2 more agents arrived, this time with equipment. Ground-penetrating radar, soil sampling kits, metal detectors. They set up a grid pattern around the dig site and started scanning. I asked how long this was going to take. Rickman said as long as necessary. He asked Sarah and me to wait inside the house while they worked. We sat at the kitchen table and watched through the window. Sarah was crying quietly, asking what she'd done, saying she'd only told her sister she didn't think it would lead to this. I told her it wasn't her fault, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Someone had to have been listening. monitoring phone calls. How else would the FBI know so quickly? Around 3 in the afternoon, Rickman came to the door and asked if he could speak with us. We let him in. He sat down at the table and took off his glasses, cleaning them with a cloth from his pocket. Then he looked at us and said something I'll never forget. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayward, what you found on your property is currently part of a classified federal investigation. I'm not authorized to tell you what kind of investigation, but I need you to understand the seriousness of this situation. You cannot discuss this find with anyone. Not friends, not family, not on social media. Do you understand?" I asked if we were in some kind of trouble. He said not yet, but that depended on our cooperation. Sarah asked what would happen if we told someone. Rickman put his glasses back on and looked at her. "Federal obstruction charges carry significant penalties," he said. "I strongly advise against testing that." He had us sign documents, non-disclosure agreements, evidence receipts, statements confirming we understood the legal restrictions on discussing the case. The whole time I was thinking, why does the FBI care about a skull? What are they trying to hide? They stayed on our property for 3 days. We weren't allowed near the dig site. They brought in more equipment, more personnel. At one point, I counted 11 people working the grid, sifting through dirt, taking samples, photographing everything. They set up a portable lab in a white tent near the barn. I tried asking questions. What were they looking for? Had they found anything else? Was this related to Bigfoot? That last question got a reaction. One of the younger agents actually laughed, but Rickman shut him down with a look. Rickman told me again that I wasn't authorized to know the details of the investigation. On the second night, I couldn't sleep. I got up around 2 in the morning and looked out the bedroom window. The dig site was lit up with portable floodlights, and I could see agents still working, in the middle of the night. That's when I knew this wasn't about archaeology or wildlife. This was a cover-up. Sarah and I started noticing other things. A black sedan parked on the road about a quarter mile from our driveway, just sitting there. When I drove into town for groceries, I saw the same sedan 3 cars behind me. Our internet seemed slower, like someone was monitoring the traffic. I checked our phone records online and found gaps, hours where no data was logged even though I knew we'd made calls. I told Sarah I thought we were being watched. She said I was being paranoid. But then she got a call from her sister in Portland. Her sister said 2 men in suits had shown up at her veterinary clinic asking questions about the conversation she'd had with Sarah. They'd wanted to know who else she'd told, whether she'd posted anything online, whether she'd taken any of the photos I'd sent. Her sister was terrified. She kept apologizing, saying she'd only mentioned it to her husband, no one else. The agents had made her sign the same kind of non-disclosure agreement we'd signed. She asked Sarah what was going on. What had we found that scared the FBI so badly? Sarah told her she couldn't talk about it, and hung up. Then she looked at me and said, "They're covering something up. They know what that skull is, and they don't want anyone else to know." I agreed, and that's when I started thinking about what we'd lost. The proof. The evidence that Bigfoot was real. The FBI had taken it all. On the 3rd day, they finished. Rickman came to the house and told us the site had been cleared, the investigation was ongoing, but they had everything they needed from our property. He handed me a business card and said if we remembered anything else or found any additional materials, we were required to contact him immediately. I asked when we'd get the skull back. He said it was federal evidence and would remain in custody indefinitely. I asked where they were taking it. He said he couldn't disclose that information. I asked if we'd ever know what it was. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "Officially, you found the partial remains of a black bear. That's what the report will say. That's what you'll tell anyone who asks." I started to argue, but he cut me off. "Mr. Hayward, this isn't a negotiation. The report is filed. The case is classified. If you contradict the official finding, you'll be in violation of the NDA you signed, and we'll prosecute. Am I clear?" I didn't say anything. He took that as agreement. The agents packed up their equipment, loaded the white tent and all their gear into a truck and drove away. Just like that. 3 days of intensive investigation, and the official story was a bear skull. After they left, Sarah and I walked out to the dig site. They'd filled in all the holes, tamped down the soil, even tried to replant some of the grass they'd torn up. If you didn't know what to look for, you'd never know they'd been there. The only evidence was the yellow crime scene tape bundled up and left in the barn, like a forgotten detail. I pulled out my phone and checked the photos. Gone. Every image I'd taken of the skull had been deleted, not just from my camera roll, but from my deleted folder, from my cloud backup. They'd been thorough. I checked my computer that night. The photos I'd saved there were gone too. The sketches in my notebook were the only physical record left, and those were crude, barely enough to prove anything. That night, 3 slow knocks came from the front door. Sarah and I looked at each other, and I saw the fear in her face. I got up and turned on the porch light, looking through the window. Nothing. I opened the door. The porch was empty, but I smelled it. Wet fur, thick and unmistakable. Whatever had been buried on our property, it was still out there, and it knew we'd found it. The knocking continued. Every night around 10:30, 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Sometimes on the front door, sometimes on the back, occasionally on the bedroom window. Sarah wanted to call Rickman, report it as part of the investigation. I told her no. I didn't trust him. I didn't trust any of them. One morning, I found footprints near the barn. Massive, at least 18 inches long, 5 toes, deep impressions in the soft earth. I photographed them with my phone, making sure to include a tape measure for scale. These photos I saved to a separate device, an old phone I kept hidden in the bottom of a toolbox. I started researching Bigfoot more seriously, reading everything I could find. Not the tourist stuff or the TV shows, but the serious reports, the databases maintained by researchers, the first-hand accounts from people who'd seen something they couldn't explain. I found patterns, knocking, gifting behavior, avoidance of direct confrontation. Everything matched what we were experiencing. I found online forums where people discussed their encounters, and I almost posted about what we'd found. But every time I started typing, I thought about the NDA, about Rickman's threat of prosecution. So I just read, learning, understanding that we weren't alone. One thread caught my attention. A man in Oregon described finding a partial skeleton on his property in 2009. He'd contacted a university, and within days, federal agents had shown up, confiscated everything, and threatened him with prosecution if he talked. His story was almost identical to ours. In the comments, 3 other people described similar experiences, all between 2008 and 2013, all involving the FBI, all ending with the same official explanation. Bear remains. I showed Sarah. She read through it twice and asked what I thought it meant. I told her I thought the government knew Bigfoot was real and was actively suppressing evidence. She asked why. I said I didn't know, but I could guess. If Bigfoot was real, it would raise questions about land use, habitat protection, maybe even human evolution. The implications would be enormous. That night, the knocking was different. Not 3 slow knocks, but a pattern. 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, pause, 3 knocks again. Like it was trying to communicate something specific. I went to the door and knocked back, matching the pattern. Silence. Then the pattern repeated, exactly the same. Sarah asked what I was doing. I told her I was responding. She said I was insane, that we should leave, sell the property, get away from whatever was out there. I said I wasn't leaving. I wanted answers. And I was starting to think the only way to get them was to interact with the creature directly. I started leaving food on the porch, apples, bread, once a whole cooked chicken. They were always gone by morning. I set up a cheap trail camera I bought in town, the kind hunters use, hoping to catch something the FBI couldn't erase. The first night, it captured nothing but darkness. The second night, a blur of movement, too fast to identify. The third night, it was gone. The camera itself just vanished. Sarah was getting more frightened. She talked about staying with her sister in Portland for a while, just until things calmed down. I asked how things were supposed to calm down when the FBI had classified our lives. She didn't have an answer. One afternoon, I was working near the tree line when I heard movement in the woods. Heavy footsteps, deliberate and slow. I froze, listening. The footsteps stopped. I called out, "I know you're there. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to tell anyone." Silence. Then a sound I'd never heard before. A low, resonant vocalization. Almost like a voice, but deeper, more textured. It echoed through the trees, and I felt it in my chest. Then the footsteps retreated, moving away quickly, and the forest went quiet. That night, I told Sarah what had happened. She asked if I'd seen it. I said no, but I'd heard it, and I was certain now. We were sharing this property with a Bigfoot. The word didn't sound crazy anymore. It sounded like the only explanation that made sense. She asked what we were supposed to do. Live here forever with this thing in the woods? Keep it secret while the FBI monitored us? I said I didn't know, but I wasn't going to let them erase what we'd found. Somehow, I was going to prove it. The next morning, I found something on the porch that changed everything. A small bundle of sticks, tied together with what looked like cedar bark, arranged in a deliberate pattern. Next to it was one of my trail cameras, the one that had disappeared. It was intact, but the memory card was missing. I picked up the bundle and examined it. The craftsmanship was crude but intentional, clearly made by hands, not natural formation. Sarah came out and saw it. She asked what it meant. I told her I thought it was a gift. The creature was trying to communicate, to show us it understood what we were doing. That night, the knocking came earlier than usual. 9 o'clock, while it was still barely dusk. 3 knocks on the front door. I opened it immediately, stepping out onto the porch. Nothing visible, but I could smell it, that wet fur smell. I spoke into the darkness. "I know you're there. I know what you are. Bigfoot, and I'm not going to let them erase you." Silence. Then, from the tree line, that low vocalization again, almost like acknowledgement. I decided to document everything I could without using technology they could track or erase. I bought a journal from a store 3 towns over, paying cash, and started writing down every detail. Dates, times, descriptions of sounds and smells, sketches of the footprints. I kept it hidden in the barn, wrapped in plastic, buried under a loose floorboard. Sarah thought I was becoming obsessed. She was probably right. But I couldn't stop thinking about what the FBI had taken from us, from the world. Proof that Bigfoot existed, and they'd buried it under a false report and classified documents. How many other people had found evidence? How many times had this happened? One evening, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. A man's voice, quiet and careful, asked if I was the person who'd found unusual remains on my property near the Cascades. I asked who was calling. He said his name was Dr. Marcus Webb, and he was a biological anthropologist who studied unclassified primates. I asked how he'd gotten my number. He said he had contacts who monitored certain federal activities, and my name had appeared in connection with a site investigation. He wanted to know what I'd found. I told him I'd signed an NDA and couldn't discuss it. He said he understood, but that if I ever wanted to talk off the record, he had secure ways to communicate. I wrote down his number and hung up. I didn't tell Sarah about the call. I didn't know if I could trust Webb, but the fact that someone outside the FBI knew what had happened meant the information wasn't as contained as Rickman had implied. That night, the pattern changed again. No knocking. Instead, I heard that vocalization, the deep, resonant sound. But it was closer this time, right outside the bedroom window. Sarah heard it too and grabbed my arm, asking what we should do. I got up and looked out the window. I could see a shape in the darkness, massive and still, just beyond the porch light's reach. I opened the window and spoke toward it. "I found your skull. They took it. The government took it. I'm sorry." The shape didn't move. I continued. "I don't know if you can understand me, but I want you to know I didn't tell them. I didn't want them to take it." The shape shifted, and I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving away from the house. Then that vocalization again, farther away, echoing through the trees. Sarah asked what I'd just done. I told her I was trying to explain. She said I was talking to a Bigfoot like it could understand English, like it cared about federal investigations. I said maybe it did. Maybe it understood more than we thought. The next morning, there was another gift on the porch. 3 smooth river stones arranged in a triangle. Sarah saw them and asked if I thought it meant forgiveness. I said I thought it meant the creature knew we'd tried to protect it. 2 weeks after the FBI left, I called Dr. Webb from a payphone in town. I don't even know if anyone uses payphones anymore, but I didn't want the call traced to my phone or my location. He answered on the second ring, like he'd been waiting. I told him what I'd found, the skull, the measurements, the FBI response. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're not the first. There've been at least 8 similar cases I know of in the last decade. All Pacific Northwest, all involving skeletal remains, all suppressed." I asked why. He said there were theories, ranging from endangered species protection to avoiding mass hysteria. But the most likely explanation was that acknowledging Bigfoot would require massive policy changes regarding federal land use, logging rights, and habitat protection. Billions of dollars in economic impact. Easier to classify it and make it disappear. I asked if he'd ever seen real evidence. He said yes, once at a colleague's lab before federal agents confiscated it. A finger bone intact, showing anatomical features consistent with a large primate, but not matching any known species. His colleague lost his tenure and was threatened with prosecution. The bone was officially labeled as misidentified bear. Remains. I asked what I should do. He said keep documenting privately, stay quiet publicly, and wait. Eventually, enough evidence would accumulate that suppression would become impossible. But it might take years, even decades. I thanked him and hung up. When I got home, Sarah was waiting on the porch. She looked terrified. She said 2 men had come by while I was gone, didn't identify themselves, just asked where I was and when I'd be back. They'd looked around the property, walked to the dig site, then left without explaining why they were there. I checked the barn. The floorboard where I'd hidden the journal was disturbed, the nails slightly pulled up. They'd found it. But when I pulled up the board, the journal was still there. They'd looked but hadn't taken it. A message. We know what you're doing. That night, I moved the journal to a new location, sealed it in a waterproof bag, and buried it in the woods about 100 yards from the house, marking the spot with a rock, arrangement that looked natural. If they came back, they wouldn't find it. The knocking came at 10:30, the usual time. 3 slow knocks on the front door. But this time, when I opened it, something was different. There, on the porch, placed carefully in the center, was my missing trail camera. Not the one that had been returned before, but the first one, the one I thought was gone forever. Next to it was the memory card. I picked up the camera and brought it inside. Sarah watched as I loaded the card into my laptop. There was one video file recorded the night the camera disappeared. The footage showed a massive hand reaching toward the lens, fingers visible, clearly not human, clearly not bear. Then, the camera rotated, showing a brief glimpse of a face. Dark hair, flat nose, amber eyes looking directly into the lens. Then, the video ended. We'd just been given proof. By the creature itself. Bigfoot had documented itself and returned the evidence to us. I copied the video to the old phone in my toolbox. The same one with the photos from the journal sketches. I didn't keep it on my computer, didn't upload it anywhere. This was the only proof we had left, and I knew if the FBI found it, it would disappear like everything else. Sarah and I watched the video maybe 20 times that night, pausing on the frame where the face was visible. It was brief, less than 2 seconds, but it was clear. This wasn't a costume, wasn't a misidentified animal. This was something real, something unknown to science, something the government was desperately trying to keep hidden. Sarah asked what we were going to do with it. I said I didn't know. Release it and face federal prosecution? Keep it hidden and let the cover-up continue? There was no good answer. The next few weeks were quiet. No FBI visits, no mysterious men in suits, no phone calls from Dr. Webb. The knocking continued, sporadic now, sometimes nights passing without any sound at all. I kept leaving offerings on the porch, and they kept disappearing. The creature was still there, still watching, but the intensity had decreased. I started thinking about what Rickman had said, that the official report listed the skull as bare remains. That was the public record, the version anyone could access. But somewhere, in a classified file, was the truth. The real measurements, the real analysis, the admission that what I'd found wasn't any known animal. I thought about trying to file a Freedom of Information Act request, but I knew it would be denied on national security grounds or simply redacted into uselessness. The system was designed to protect this secret, and I was just one person with a video nobody would believe, and a story I legally couldn't tell. One night, Sarah told me she wanted to move. Not just talk about it, but actually do it. Sell the property, relocate, start over somewhere without Bigfoot in the woods and FBI surveillance on the road. She said she couldn't live like this anymore, always looking over her shoulder, always wondering if men in suits were going to show up again. I understood. I didn't want to leave, didn't want to abandon the creature that had trusted us enough to return evidence. But I also couldn't ask Sarah to keep living in fear. I told her we'd start looking for a new place. That night, the knocking came one last time. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the front door. I went outside, and there on the porch was the most elaborate gift yet. A woven basket, crude but functional, filled with small objects, bird bones, polished stones, what looked like primitive tools made from shaped rocks and wood. It was a collection, carefully assembled, offered as a final gesture. I picked up the basket and looked toward the tree line. I couldn't see anything in the darkness, but I knew it was there. "We have to leave," I said to the shadows. "They won't stop watching us, and I can't protect you if they keep coming back. But I won't forget. I'll keep the evidence safe, I promise." No response, no vocalization, no movement. Just silence and the smell of wet fur on the night air. I brought the basket inside and added it to the hidden phone, the only archive of proof that Bigfoot was real and that the government knew it. We sold the property 6 months later to a young couple from Seattle looking for rural peace. I didn't tell them what we'd experienced. Some things can't be explained, and I didn't want to burden them with knowledge that would only bring trouble. The skull, the creature, the FBI cover-up, all of it stayed silent. We moved to eastern Washington, 4 hours away, a small town where nobody knew us. I got a job with the county planning office. Sarah found a teaching position at a middle school. We tried to build a normal life. But I still have the phone, hidden in a safe deposit box now, the video and photos preserved. Evidence I'll probably never share. Sometimes I think about Dr. Webb's words that eventually enough. Evidence would accumulate that suppression would become impossible. But 8 years later, I haven't seen any change. Bigfoot remains a joke, a tourist attraction, a myth. And people like me who've seen the truth and had it stolen, we stay quiet, bound by NDAs and fear. Last month I got a call from an unknown number. I didn't answer. They left a voicemail. It was Rickman. He said the investigation from 2014 was being formally closed, the evidence destroyed per federal protocol, and I was reminded that my NDA remained in effect indefinitely. He thanked me for my cooperation and ended the call. They'd destroyed it, the skull, the soil samples, everything they'd taken. The only proof left was what I'd hidden, the video and sketches the creature and I had preserved together. I thought about calling Dr. Webb, asking what this meant, but I didn't. I already knew. Sometimes, late at night in our new house, I hear 3 slow knocks. I know it's just the wind or the house settling, but it makes me remember. Bigfoot was real. The government knew. They covered it up. And somewhere in the Cascades, in those woods we left behind, it's still out there. Still knocking. Still waiting for someone brave enough to tell the truth without fear of what comes after. I'm not that person yet. Maybe someday, but not yet.